In 1994, psychologists at Stanford ran a quiet experiment. They handed a group of people a blank piece of paper. One instruction: complete this sentence. I am someone who deserves. Many of them stopped, pen hovering. Silence. Not because they didn't understand the question, but because something deep inside them, something with no name and no address, refused to answer. When the researchers analyzed the results, they found something that should have made headlines, but never did. The people who left the page blank earned less on average, saved less, turned down more opportunities. Not because they were less intelligent, not because life had been crueler to them, but because somewhere in the architecture of the self, a quiet verdict had already been reached. I am not the kind of person to whom good things reliably happen. Welcome to Episode 3 of The Psychology of Money. Tonight, we go somewhere most financial conversations are afraid to go. Not into your portfolio, not into your spending habits, into something older and stranger.
Every human being walking this earth carries an invisible verdict about themselves and money. Not a conscious opinion, not something you would say at a dinner party. Something deeper. A gut-level, wordless conclusion that was handed to you long before you had the cognitive tools to question it. For some people, that verdict sounds like this: money flows toward me. I am someone who figures it out. When I need resources, I find them. These people apply for the raise. They start the business. They make the call. Not because they are smarter, but because the verdict is already in their favor. For others, the verdict sounds like this: money is something other people have. I work hard, but it never stays. Something always comes up. These people receive the same opportunities and walk past them. Not from laziness, from a story they cannot see, running silently in the background. The psychologist Valerie Young spent 20 years studying what she called the Impostor Syndrome, the feeling that you do not deserve your own success. And what she found:
to understand your financial identity, you have to travel back to a place you probably haven't visited in years: your childhood kitchen. Research in behavioral economics, particularly work done by Dr. Brad Klontz, one of the leading financial psychologists in the world, shows that our core money beliefs are formed between the ages of 5 and 15, before the prefrontal cortex is fully developed, before we have language sophisticated enough to interrogate what we're absorbing. We don't learn money in school. We learn it at the dinner table, in the arguments our parents had behind closed doors, in the way a parent's face changed when a bill arrived, in the offhand sentence, said once and never repeated, that somehow lodged itself permanently in the brain. We're not the kind of people who. Money doesn't grow on trees.
Rich people only got there by stepping on someone. You have to spend money to make money. Don't talk about money. It's rude. Each of these sentences is a seed, planted in soil that was fertile precisely because you were young, impressionable, and completely dependent on the adults around you to explain the world. Klontz calls these money scripts, the unconscious rules we run on. And he identified 4 major categories. The first, money avoidance. The belief that money is bad, corrupting, or shameful. People with this script often self-sabotage at the moment of financial breakthrough, unconsciously, as if wealth would make them a different, and lesser person. The second, money worship. The belief that more money will solve all problems. These are the people who cannot stop chasing, who reach every milestone and feel nothing, because the script says enough is always just a little further ahead. The third, money status. The belief that net worth equals self-worth. These are the people spending money they don't have, to impress people they don't like, to feel something they cannot name. The fourth, money vigilance. The belief that you must always be cautious, always be saving, never be comfortable. These people accumulate and cannot enjoy a single dollar of it because relaxing feels like dying. Look at those 4 categories honestly.
There is a cost to running an unexamined financial identity. Economists wouldn't call it a tax, but that is exactly what it is. Consider the research of Sendel Mullainathan and Elder Shafir, published in their landmark book, Scarcity. They found that the mental bandwidth consumed by financial stress, the constant low-level calculation, the worry, the vigilance, is cognitively equivalent to losing 13 IQ points. That is more than the cognitive impact of a sleepless night. In other words, the story of "I never have enough" actively makes you less capable of solving the problem of not having enough. The identity creates the condition reinforces the identity. The loop closes. But here is what makes this more insidious than simple stress. Identity doesn't just consume bandwidth, it filters opportunity. The human brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second. It consciously registers about 40. The unconscious mind, running on your money scripts, your inherited verdicts, your unexamined stories, decides which 40 bits make it through. If your identity says people like me don't invest, your brain will quietly, efficiently, invisibly filter out every piece of information that contradicts that story. The opportunity will be in front of you. The article will be on your screen. The conversation will happen at the party. And you will not register any of it. Not because you are stupid, but because the filter is working exactly as designed. This is the identity tax. It is paid not in dollars, but in unseen doors, unheard conversations, unopened envelopes, a whole parallel life that existed and was never noticed. The wealthy are not people who found more opportunities. They are people whose identity allowed them to see the ones that were already there. Here is something the human brain values more than money, more than happiness, and, in the short term, even more than truth: consistency. We are wired, at a fundamental neurological level, to act in ways that confirm who we believe we are. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the acute discomfort we feel when our behavior contradicts our self-image. And we will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid it. This is why lottery winners so frequently return to their previous economic level within 5 years. Not because they lack financial education, because the money is inconsistent with the story. The brain, loyal to a fault, works quietly to restore equilibrium. This is why people who grew up in poverty often struggle with wealth, even when they achieve it. Not because they don't deserve it, because wealth feels wrong, foreign, suspicious, unearned, in the body of someone whose identity was forged in scarcity. And this is why the standard financial advice, spend less, save more, invest early, is almost entirely useless for a significant portion of the population. Not because the advice is wrong, because it is addressed to a rational economic agent. And human beings are not rational economic agents. They are storytellers trying to stay in character. The most dangerous financial Identity surgery sounds dramatic. It is actually very quiet. It begins with a single, uncomfortable question. Is this belief mine, Or was it handed to me? Not a rhetorical question, a genuine one. Sit with it. Write it down if you need to. Trace the belief back to its origin, to the specific moment, the specific voice, the specific room where this story first entered your life. And then ask the harder question. If I had never heard that voice, if I had grown up in a different kitchen, a different country, a different culture, would I still believe this about money? Almost always, the answer is no. The belief was never yours. It was borrowed, inherited, absorbed without consent. And anything borrowed can be returned. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, makes an observation that applies here with almost surgical precision. He says, the most effective way to change behavior is not to set goals. It is to change the story about who you are. Don't say, I want to save more money. Say, I am someone who pays themselves first. Don't say, I'm trying to stop impulse spending. Say, I am someone who buys with intention. Don't say, I hope to invest someday. Say, I am an investor, at whatever scale I can manage today. These sentences feel false at first. They are supposed to be. You are not describing who you are. You are voting for who you are becoming. Every action that follows, every transfer to the savings account, every investment decision, every quiet no to a purchase that doesn't align is another vote. And votes accumulate. Identity is not a revelation. It is an accumulation.
There is one more layer, and it is perhaps the most important one. For many people, more than anyone in finance likes to admit, the invisible barrier to wealth is not ignorance. It is not laziness. It is not even bad habits. It is permission. They have never given themselves permission to want more. Permission to take up space in an economic system that, for one reason or another, class, race, gender, family narrative, cultural messaging, communicated to them that the seat at the table was not for them. The economist Derek Hamilton has spent years studying what he calls stratification economics, the way identity categories create self-fulfilling economic prophecies. When an entire group of people receives, generation after generation, the message that wealth is for someone else, that message becomes infrastructure. It shapes decisions before decisions are made. It is as real as any policy, any law, any interest rate. This is not a political statement. It is a psychological one. Permission is not given to you. You issue it yourself. And the issuing of it, the quiet, private, almost rebellious act of deciding that you are allowed to want financial security, financial freedom, financial dignity, is often the most important financial decision a person will ever make. It happens in the mind, long before it happens in the bank account.
We began tonight with a blank piece of paper, a sentence that many people could not finish. I am someone who deserves. By now, you understand why that sentence is so hard. Because to finish it honestly, you have to confront the inherited story, the identity tax, the consistency trap, the permissions you were never granted and never thought to grant yourself. But you also understand now that the story is not fixed. It was never fixed. It was always, always a first draft. The invisible architecture of wealth, which we began exploring in Episode 2, rests on something more fundamental than savings rates and investment strategies. It rests on the story you carry about who you are in relation to money. The wealthiest people, not always in bank accounts, but always in life, are not the ones who figured out the perfect system. They are the ones who figured out themselves, who sat quietly
quietly and honestly with the scripts they inherited, who asked which ones were true, which were borrowed, and which needed to be burned entirely. And then they wrote something new. Not because anyone told them to, but because they finally understood that the pen had always been in their hand. The blank paper is still in front of you,